We are super excited to be here and to talk with you about hands-on with GitHub in the enterprise. My name is Jessica Dean, and I'm a staff developer advocate here at GitHub.
And my name is Ben Gotch. I'm a director of product management at GitHub.
Now, we have a lot of things that we want to cover, that we want to show you. We only have about 60 minutes, but we also want to make sure that you get time to ask questions, or if you want to give product feedback, Ben is the person to give it to. He is the PM of Actions, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. So we're going to dive right in and get started on some demos.
So we're going to be covering 4 core themes today. We're going to be looking at how we can provide you visibility into and across your enterprise. We're going to be looking at how you can apply those guardrails, so those safety rails that keep your developers working in the way you hope they work. We're going to be looking at the controls you can apply to really keep people working and locked down and apply the security facets that you need. And then we're going to be looking at how we can turn that all into that sort of CNCF style golden path for CI/CD and the developer experience of that. So to start with, we're going to jump in and we're going to look at some visibility and planning.
Just out of curiosity, while he's setting up the system and switching it back, are we on?
Oop.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, let's make sure.
Make sure we're actually on my machine.
You were showing the desktop. While we're setting everything up, just out of curiosity, how many of you are currently using GitHub Enterprise or GitHub Business? By show of hands. Fantastic. How many of you, just keep your hands up if you're using Enterprise? All right, and then business organizations? Okay, cool. So a good majority of enterprise, some business organizations. How many of you are currently using issues and planning and boards and things like discussions? Fantastic. Yes, great. All right, this is for you.
Cool. I'm going to do one more selfish question. How many of you all are using Actions today?
Sweet.
Sweet. Okay, so I thought the best way to talk through and plan our work for the day, plan the session we're going to do, is much as any good hubber, anyone that works at GitHub, is I'd use GitHub to plan what I'm going to do. So we've got our backlog here, which is we're acting as a platform engineering team, and we're looking at the different asks we've had from across our company for how we can improve the experience for the different teams that we work with. So the first one is how we can improve that visibility for work tracking across our organization. So in this instance, our PMO has asked us to look at 3 core things: how we can provide work linking, how we can set up a project board for them with some custom attributes to understand that, and then ultimately how we can automate some of that reporting around what they're doing. So let's jump in and have a look, first of all, at how work linking is set up in GitHub. So in our PMO repo, they need to probably do more work, only one issue. We've got an item to track our role-based access project across our front-end, back-end repos. So there's a couple of ways we can start thinking about how we want to link these work items together. The first one is we can quite simply come in and we can add an existing issue from any other project, any other repo. So we can go to our front end, and we can see all the issues that are coming in here from the front end. Now, what we can't see here is we've got a parent issue and we've got some child issues already, but we can add that parent issue as a child here, and then that linking's in, and we can also expand that out and see the child issues that come beneath that. The other way we can start to link these things together is we can actually look at using projects to make that easier to do. So if we come up and get started with a project, we can create a new project. So we're not going to do it from a template today.
You can use templates, so if you have project boards or designs or layouts and things that you use for your organization or for whatever you currently use for issues and planning, because I know not many of you raise your hands for that, but you can have templates to kind of help your different organizations in your enterprise or different teams be able to easily get started with project boards, planning, and things that just set them up for success.
So this time, as we're adding things in, we get a much richer search of how we want to add things into our project. So rather than adding anything from AOC, we can go to our front end. We might want to add our back end. We can go to our back end. Oops, if I can type.
And this is just adding issues into the project. You can set up different views if you're used to Kanban style boards, if you're used to table boards, and then you can handle the filtering. You can also set up different properties to be able to kind of figure out what is going to help you measure success or see the insights for your team.
So I'll add those 2 items in, and what we can actually see is we've automatically had the sub-items added in as well. So there's a choice there on how we want to actually report in this project. Maybe we want to remove the sub-items, and maybe we just want to report on that sort of parent issue for this. If we wanted to do that, we'd add something like seeing just a sub-issue progress on that parent item, and then we could just remove the other items from our project just by deleting them. If if it will let me.
We might have some rules and permissions.
Yeah. So the other thing I want to do is look at understanding the relationship between some of these and some of those milestones and what's going to block other pieces of work. So if we add a new view and we add a roadmap view, this is our timeline view that we have. We can look at adding any existing milestones this team has already set up in here into this view. Now, we can actually see that this team's already set up a milestone for a front-end dependency for the front-end team that they need to be ready for. So we might want to think about having a view that are just these critical milestone items. And for that, we might want to go and create a custom property and just apply that to those items that have milestones associated with them. So adding custom properties is an attribute of the project itself. And we can just add a new field, call it critical. We can make it a single select. We can just have true, false. And then we'll look at which item had milestones. We've got our front-end dependency. We'll just make that critical. Come back to our view. And then we can see we've now got critical, true, and we can filter that down. Now, there's no hard linking today in GitHub for dependencies, for things that are blocking each other. But that is something that in the next 2 or 3 months we're going to be adding to GitHub, is that sort of, in the next few months we're going to be adding that ability to have those hard lock dependencies. So with that, we've now got a project. We've got our filtered view, we've got a custom attribute, and our work items are linked. The last thing then to check and understand is how all of this actually tracks back to the work that we're doing and how that's actually tracked in our repo. So if we go to our front-end repo, we have a look, we've got a pull request in here, which is the initial design for role-based access control. And in this, we can see that we've marked a note that this is addressing issue number 4. So if we go to issue number 4, we can see that it was mentioned on this issue, and we can also see that its parent issue is called out here. So what this gives you is it gives you that full traceability from that top-level project through to the milestones, through to the work items, through to the actual PRs that are required to complete that work. So if we go back to our board and the asks that we had from our PMO team, the only other one we had was to look at how we can automate the reporting on the progress on this. Now, one cool thing that we've added recently is, and this is also called out in the keynote, is the ability to access GitHub models through the Actions workflow. So the GitHub token in the Actions workflow can now access GitHub models. And that lets us do some kind of cool things. So if we go to our IAC, so our control repo, and we're going to have a look at one of our workflows. We have this new summarize workflows YAML. Now in here, we're fetching all the issues from any given repo. So we've got those as variables that we can pass in to say which repo do we want to fetch the issues from. And then down here, we are, where is it? We're building a JSON blob of, thank you, the issues that we've got, and our prompt saying, can you analyze these and return a result? Thank you.
That way so we can kind
of
collapse
that. See all of it. Yeah.
Now, by the way, this example, because this is still a very new feature, you don't have to write, what is this, 180 plus lines of YAML or code. We do now, in the time that this has come out, we do now also have an action that you can use where you can give it a system prompt and a regular prompt, and I have an example of that. But this gives you a lot more control where you can start to think about how you can programmatically take advantage of models as part of your workflows as well, whether you're doing things like what he's about to show you as far as summarizing issues, or even maybe you want to analyze your templates, or you want to analyze the linting and testing reports, or your code coverage, or you want to have a models-powered or AI-powered summary for the Dependabot alerts in your organization, security alerts. The extension of being able to invoke models as part of your DevOps workflow is something that's going to, I think, change the game because no one else is really talking about this at this time. So for example, right now, this is a summary report or a workflow that fired off, and this is analyzing all open issues currently in this particular repo, giving you statistics. The issue state is open, It's a number of issues processed, it's 18, and then it's giving you a detailed summary of here's the key problems in your repo, here's the suggested solutions, here's next steps, and this can run on a cron job. You can have it, you can invoke Slack or chat ops and send it to a Slack channel. You can have weekly reports, weekly emails. You can continue to kind of build on this where you can get now an actual AI-powered summary health of your organization, of your projects, of your teams, of your enterprise.
So if we go back and we look at what we were trying to achieve as we set out to do this piece of work. Oh, no, not start. We've linked work items together. We've created that project board with a custom field, and we've got that traceability from planning to start, and we've got that automated reporting. And it's that quick and that simple to go through the linking, the projects, and that traceability in GitHub Issues. If you want to learn more about planning and tracking with GitHub Issues, try to get QR codes for everything. Give everyone a chance. Scan. Everyone good? I see some thumbs up. I still see some phones though. Cool. Okay, so that is issues, that is projects. We now need to go and see what the next ask is in our backlog. Our next ask is to look at how we can improve code integrity in our code base and how we can add rules and policies around how people are working. So the first thing we want to do here is think about where we want to apply those policies and rules. Is it across all repositories or is it across a subset? So here, we need to head up to our organization and look at how we can actually start grouping repositories together so that we're only going to apply our policies to a subset of them. And this is something that's somewhat new in GitHub, and that's our custom repository properties. Custom repo properties allow you to, unlike something like topics, these are an enterprise managed way of applying attributes to repositories that either you can enforce or you can have your repo administrators opt into. So if we want to add a new property, we can say call this one criticality, or just call it critical. Choose our type, we can say true, false. We can say whether we want to allow the repositories themselves to set this. We're not going to. In this instance, we're going to require it for all repositories. I'm going to start with it being false. Or not, because I don't have my passkey with me. Didn't think of that.
That's another thing. You can also connect GitHub to different IDP providers. So for example, at GitHub, we use Okta, so you can make sure that you have your enterprise and your organization back behind your preferred. Bring your own identity provider. That was an announcement from last year at Universe. But in the event, had Ben had his passkey with him, when you go and create that rule, that custom property, it saves it, and now you have a property you can use to filter the projects and the repositories within your organization and within your enterprise.
Yep, so to apply that to my repos, what I could do is I could come in, I can build a complex filter to find particular repositories that I want to apply this to, and that's based on existing properties, the language, existing topics, last updated, and then with that in place, I can multi-apply and edit the properties across those so that I can say I only want this subset of repositories to have my new criticality label. With that in place, I can come across and I can start to look at repo rule sets. Repo rule sets is a pretty big investment from all of GitHub and all of the teams at GitHub. So that's actions, issues, repos. We're all looking at repo rule sets as that new canonical way that enterprises can have control over everything that's happening in their repositories across all the features in GitHub. So in this instance, we might want to create our new branch rule set. So I want to call this like core protection. Now, one cool thing about rule sets is that we don't have to turn them on by default. We can work on them while they're disabled, and we can also put them in evaluate mode. This means that they're in trial. They're not going to necessarily block people, but we can see what the outcome of that rule set is and how often it's being applied. And that's something we'll look at in a minute in the rule insights. Rule sets also allow you to have bypass, which means that if you need to have some actors in your organization who need to be authorized to take actions outside of that rule set, whether it's changing a particular file, whether it's pushing a particular branch without review, we can choose who might be the bypassers there. So we have a custom role in our organization already called bypassers. So another attribute of GitHub organizations is that you can create custom roles and assign people to those. Those roles can have different levels of access to different attributes across actions, across repositories, across different organization settings. And they can also then be used to group them differently to then include in your rule sets. We can then choose how we want to target. Well, in this instance, we want to do it by property. Include, select our property. Fortunately, I created a mission critical one before I came out. True. And then we can choose how we want that to target out on the branch. In this instance, we might just want it on the default branch. And then we can choose what rules we want. So in this instance, we might want to require signed commits, and we might require pull requests with 2 approvers. And then we can create that. Again, I forgot my Uber key, so it's going to ask me to auth, which is something I didn't think about when I came to do this. With that created, we can then jump over into our rule insights. And we can then see all our rule sets and how they're being applied across our organization. One cool thing I did notice earlier is that we can see where we've got Copilot doing things now as well in here. So Copilot is just another actor in our organization. But we can also see where our rules that are only in evaluation. And in this instance, Copilot wasn't blocked, but it would have been if that rule wasn't in evaluate. So I can then, as an enterprise admin, go and understand and ensure that I'm either changing how that team's behaving or warn them if there's going to be failures as a result of that new rule I'm creating that might block them in their day-to-day work. So the other rule set, which I personally am really excited about, is our push protection rules. Push protection rules allow you to restrict things like file paths which can be pushed to within a repository, which, as I work on GitHub Actions, is really exciting, as it means you can start to protect some of your core workflows or core pipelines within your organization to say who's allowed to edit these pipelines, which teams can do this, and you can start to actually segregate within things like monorepos, which teams can change the pipeline, which teams can't. And it's the start of building that really cool sort of ownership model within larger repositories, splitting between different teams and different groups. So I think with that, we've probably met our goal of setting up some of those initial rule sets. So the next thing we want to look at is how we can go and do some standard templates for our organization. So again, that's how we can move towards that sort of CNCF style golden path templating for our repositories.
Real quick, just to make sure, how many of you are using template repos or golden repos or the concept of that in your organization? A handful. How many of you have no idea what a golden repo is? You can raise your hand.
Oh,
perfect.
Cool.
Do you want to go ahead and explain? And when he says CNCF, that's the Cloud Native Cloud Foundation. If you come from the Kubernetes world, that's what it stands for. But the CNCF kind of golden repo is like the standard. And Ben can do a great job explaining it.
Yeah, so what we find is a lot of sort of central platform engineering teams, a lot of those GitHub administrators are looking to create paved paths for their teams, standard sets of pipelines, standard release flows, standard templates for standard types of projects that they can then hand out to their teams so they can really start to build that standardization across their estate and produce a standard way of working for everyone in their organization. Now, there's various ways to do that. It might be that you just want to start by standardizing pipelines, but when you want to look more robustly at how you standardize the rules in a repository, how you want to standardize the packages, maybe it's how you want to standardize some of those initial deployment attributes as well, like Terraform templates and things like that. How do you get all of those in one place that your team can say, cool, I want to go and start a new Go project that's going to deploy to our standard environment. And a lot of teams then extend that with standard deployment, standard database configurations, so you can have essentially a cookie cutter new project create across your entire organization.
It's basically a way to help your teams and your projects and any new teams that you're going to scale up and scale out as your organization and enterprise grows. It's a way to set everyone up for success, because a lot of times when we're creating new projects, new organizations and new teams, some of the default stuff that we do is repeatable. We're just rinsing and repeating, and the goal is also that we follow the dry principle. We don't want to repeat ourselves unnecessarily. So if we can set up things like template repositories, like the Go example that Ben used, or maybe JavaScript or Python, maybe you have a set of, here's the default getting started, workflows for Go, workflows for Python, workflows for JavaScript, and maybe the reusable workflows, which we'll talk about also. But here's the default templates and files to get started. That is the golden, the North Star. That's the stuff that's been vetted. And then you don't have to go and recreate by adding those workflows and adding those linting and testing processes, and then even any of the actual file structure for Go. Maybe you're doing, like I said, like Node. Maybe you have a golden repo for Node 18, Node 20, and this is the one that has been vetted, has everything that a new team needs to get started, and they can just create a repo off of that golden image. It's, again, you're setting everyone up for success.
So one of the cool things, as we're setting up this repo, we can see that, again, those custom properties have come in. This is one my organization is set up, that they've set a property, which every repository has to have an owner. So as I'm setting up this repository, I can't create it without assigning a user as my owner. So as I come down here, I can choose from my template. This is one of our demo organizations, so we have quite a lot of templates. So any of these could be how we want to bootstrap this repository. So let's just grab one from within this organization. Got a lot of demos. So if we grab, say, Advanced Security Terraform, and then we create, this repository will be bootstrapped with all the contents of that repository from the offset. And that's everything from the tools, the settings, and I get my .github folder, my Terraform folder, and I've got all my other guides in there as well, ready to go and start working on this project.
Real quick. Just to show you, maybe you have an individual repo that you want to set up and say, okay, this is going to be one that I want to use as that bootstrap example, as the golden repo. You can also come into the repo settings, and right at the top is how you can choose to set this also as a template repository. And then you can also set additional settings as far as requiring contributors to sign off on any kind of commits. But the template repository is the big one, because that's what allows new users to come in and generate repositories off of that template. Or you can follow the other path that Ben demoed, but you can do this individually as well if you're still kind of building this out and you don't want to scroll through that list. Sorry, I didn't mean to take the mouse away, but go ahead.
Please do. Cool. So the other way we can look at doing that reuse across our organization is just looking at the pipeline side. So that's looking at how we can produce some reusability within our GitHub Action workflows. And that's also just as easy. So going back into those same settings, if we wanted the workflows in this repository to be ones that could be reused across all of our organization, all we need to do is come down to Actions, in general, and then change our access. So if we said this is accessible from other repositories in our organization, all the workflow files in here can now be referenced by other workflow files to reuse that content anywhere else within our organization or across our entire enterprise. That means that if we want to create some standard workflows for anything from code scanning to deployment, all of those can be referenced from within this repo from any other workflow.
And you can do it, the two options that are on the screen, you can do it either from the organization level or the enterprise level. So you can kind of scope it down.
So with that, what we've talked through is we've looked at how we're going to do our rule sets, how we can do golden repos, and how we can enable a repo to share its workflows, share those pipelines as templates across our organization. So to learn more about governance at GitHub, got another QR code. I warned you there'd be more. This is very much focused on the rule sets, as that really is how we're doubling down on governance in GitHub. All the things like some of those action settings that we saw, we're going to be looking at moving a lot of those into rule sets over the next sort of year or so, as rule sets really are that core way we're thinking at GitHub of managing our control and compliance. So with that, we now need to jump over to our next section. I think it's going to be your laptop.
Perfect. All right, let's go ahead and switch over to, I'm on 2.
2.
Perfect. So one thing I just wanted to touch on that Ben also covered, it was when we were talking about golden repos, also reusable workflows. One example of that, let me show you. I'm in an infrastructure's code repo, that is our golden or North Star, where we're using things like reusable workflows. So let me go back to, let's take a look at the workflow files that we have in our .github workflows folder. And let's just take a look at something like lint test. And so we'll take a look at lines 3 through 12. The first thing is that I'm setting the trigger to be on workflow call, which is right there on line 4. And then I'm defining some inputs. And inputs allow me to pass in some parameters and some variables. So in this case, I'm passing in PR repo and PR ref. This allows me to rinse and repeat not only across repos, but across different scenarios. So whether I'm merging on main or I'm doing it on a pull request. And what's cool is you can then link that with something like conditional statements. So for example, if I look down here under coverage, we're taking a common theme would be having to lint and test your applications, right? Rather than having to rewrite the same workflow several times, I have on my coverage step that I can actually pass in that I'm going to check out the code with the inputs from the PR repo or the PR ref, whatever has called that workflow. You have a caller and a called. And then whatever has called that workflow will be able to pass that in with those inputs, with those parameters. And then down at the bottom here, you can also do some conditional statements for whether it's successful, if it's a failure, if it's canceled. And if we go take a look at one of the workflows that would do this, let's take a look at Octodemo, and we'll look at the front end, and then we'll also look at the back end. We can see an example of what that workflow looks like when it's using the conditional statement. So under lint test, and we scroll down, if it's a push into, maybe it's on merge into main, it'll fire. Or if it's a pull request and it's not closed, then we'll go ahead, and this is the big important line, is 26, it's calling that reusable workflow. So the front end will use the same one, the back end will use the same one, and then I can tie this in to something called job summaries. So let me go back over to here. What you kind of saw from the conditional statements for adding linter results, if it's successful, if it's failed, I'm outputting this to something called GitHub step summary. So now I'm also adding standardization in across my organization, across my projects, and I'm making sure that any project that's using this reusable workflow from that golden repo is now going to get the same reporting. I'm going to get the same output as far as a job summary from code coverage, from linting results. I'm able to kind of have that standardization and set of processes across the board. That's one thing that's really powerful. So I can show you on the front end, if we take a look at an actions workflow that ran, and we'll look at the lint test and then scroll down, we can see the steps that it ran. It's always zoomed in pretty far when I'm on a larger display. But we can see that we had an initial step, a coverage step, and then on a post run, it just does another validation kind of cleanup step. But the important parts are I have inputs used where I'm able to output that job summary, and I like to do this just to validate what parameters were used. It helps me troubleshoot if something went wrong, what branch actually kicked this off, which repo did call it, was it using the right ref? And then scrolling down further, I get those coverage summary results where, I have this on the front end, and if we go take a look at the same run, let's take a look at the back end, we'll have the same type of reports, only on this one, we know that we now need to do some work because the code coverage reports are red on this one. But we have the same kind of standardization, and that's super powerful as well. And let's see also, one of the other things I wanted to show you was on infrastructure as code. Again, we talked about the ability of having that golden repo, having those conditions on settings. We can do our template repository, and under rule sets, we can make sure that we are defining rule sets per organization or globally from the organization as well. One big thing is when you're doing your deployments and when you're stitching all this stuff together, as far as job summaries, reusable workflows, golden repos, at some point you have to get to your deployment, which means that whatever cloud you're using, whether that's Azure, Google, anything else, you have to have that trust relationship, right? And so how do we also have OIDC factored into this? When you add in, number one, GitHub supports OIDC across the board for any cloud provider. But when you add that in as part of your reusable workflow, now you don't have to worry about defining that in each individual repo, organization, or enterprise. You can have it be a global setting. An easy way to do that with Azure is we can use something called the Azure Developer CLI, which is different from the regular Azure CLI. But we can use the Azure Developer CLI to actually set up that trust relationship for us. Before I do, I want to call out that I'm using the Actions extension here over on the right-hand side of my screen. And if I hit refresh, under repository secrets and repository variables, you'll see that I don't have anything right now. Now, if I run a command for azd pipeline config and say, no, I don't want to add a workflow file or anything to get started, though if you're new to Actions and you wanted to, the Azure Developer CLI will actually help you get started. This will go through and it'll talk to Azure because it's authenticated to my Azure account and it's authenticated to my repo. And if we take a look at what it's doing, it actually set up our service principal or our trust relationship, our federated identity, and it set up any environment variables that we needed over into GitHub Actions. So we don't have to worry about any kind of service principals, client secrets, client IDs, bash scripts, or anything that we used to do back in the day. This extension or this CLI actually handles it for us. So now on the right-hand side, if I click the refresh button, we'll see that it added a whole bunch of secrets and everything for me. So now I've established that trust relationship. And let me show you real quick of what that did on the repo itself. So we'll open the repo tab. You can see this is live. It just updated now. So we got our secret for our azd initial environment config. And under variables, we also have variables that updated just now as well. On the Azure side of things, it created the trust relationship. This is under certificates and secrets in Entra, in Okta, to have that secure way. It created federated credentials to where we have on main and on pull request. This particular repo for backend is going to be allowed to authenticate and sign into Azure to go do whatever deployment. And again, that one step can be part of the larger reusable workflow or template. But what's even more important is you can scope this down. Because a lot of times in production, we don't just go on main and pull requests. We have our different environments in GitHub. Maybe we're also firing and deploying on tags and releases. We can easily now scope this down and update this credential, because the trust relationship is already established, that we can go under credential where we select our scenario. We have a few different scenarios. Let's select GitHub Actions. And then scrolling down even further, we can scope the entity. So for here, we can choose whether it's an environment, if we're doing production, if we're doing staging, if we have a different branch that we want to be able to allow to release or pull over into our Azure environment. And we can see that in action, where if we go back, if we go back over to our actions deployment, and let's take a look at one of our, some of them are failing, but if we take a look at our last successful deployment, where it deployed a new revision, the Azure OIDC login, and we kind of zoom in here, you can see it was able to get the federated token details because it was allowed on main. It was able to verify the subject claim, and it was able to actually log in using OIDC. So the Azure Developer CLI is a great way to easily get started with federated access. But again, if you are using other clouds, GitHub Actions supports that particular feature natively. And then that also helps you kind of scope down the permissions as far as least privilege. If you don't want tags or other branches or Copilot branches even to have permissions to do deployments, you're scoping that down connected over to Entra. Another thing we want to talk about is security from a perspective of logging and traceability. So you've deployed everything, you have your stuff running over in Azure, but how do you verify what was deployed? How do you verify the integrity of what you've published maybe to NPM or PyPy, right? As part of that, you have to consider how you can sign that how you can have a cryptographic signature to be able to sign the artifact. Maybe you're signing it over in Azure Container Registry or a binary that you published. We also have something that's called artifact attestations. And let me get the, let's see.
Who here has heard of artifact attestations from those who are using GitHub?
So artifact attestations is a great way to give a signature or a thumbprint. The same way that when you're creating a trust relationship between your GitHub repo and your cloud provider, you have a thumbprint that verifies like, hey, I know you, you're cool, I trust you. The artifact attestation also signs it. So if you take a look at, here's our, let me take a look at so by the way, we have our GitHub CLI that is open source, and all of this is publicly available, so you can go to github.com/CLI/CLI and see how we do it. But you can see that there was actually an attestation report that was created. So when we open that report, we can see the provenance, we can see the SLSA dev report, we can see how to verify that this CLI, this binary that I downloaded actually came from GitHub, actually came from the repo. We can see the config digest, and we can see all the subjects. So every single binary that was created gets that signature. If we go back over to the actions report, and you can have that log for every single thing that fires, but I want to show you the simple way that this is added to actions, which again, you can put into the golden repo, the golden template, and be able to reuse this as part of the standardization. But if you search for provenance in here, it's part of our attestations for, let me collapse this sidebar. There we go. Nope, I can't collapse the sidebar. All right, let me just search for provenance again so you can see that. It's this particular action right here, and we'll zoom in, for action/attest build provenance. Simply adding that step and pointing it to the path, or if you're using, like I said, Azure Container Registry, let's say that you're using the official Docker action from the Actions Marketplace, that will automatically sign and handle your provenance and sign that for Azure Container Registry. But what I love about this particular action is you can also pin it to either SHA, to tag, to branch. That way you know that this is the version that I'm using for whatever my deployments are. And then when you're updating it, here's the other big benefit. When you're updating it in the golden repo or in the golden workflow, you don't have to then go update that tag 16 other places. You update it in one place, and it trickles down to everything else that's calling that particular workflow.
The reason we've used the sharp in here is that right now minor versions are mutable within GitHub Actions when you're using an action from the marketplace, meaning that the contents of that can be changed by the publisher. That will change in the next couple of months. We're going to move to having our minor versions be completely immutable, meaning that if you pin to a minor version, that cannot change under your feed anymore, and you'll be able to rely purely on things like Dependabot to help you move up through those versions without having to worry about sharpening anymore. So I'm quite excited for sharpening to be a thing of the past.
Yes. Now, one more thing I wanted to show you, because we did talk about models, and we've talked about job summaries. One of the other things that I mentioned earlier is how you can tie models into your job summaries. You saw the being able to analyze things like issues. You can also give it bicep templates and say, let's say that somebody made a change to the infrastructure template, and as part of your validation now, you want to invoke models to say what change was made to this particular template, or AWS template, or Google template, doesn't matter. What was made, you can invoke models. You can also use it, and you saw this, if anyone saw the keynote yesterday, when you're doing things with RAG, with retrieval augmented generation, and LLMs, a lot of times you have to run what's called evaluations on them. You have to see the fluency, the coherency, the validity. Are the agents that I'm running or the models that I'm running, are they giving me the information that I expect? And so you tend to create these evaluation reports. Number one, we have an official evaluations action now. So just to show you down here, so we have an official evaluation actions that you can use across your enterprise, which is great because as was shown in yesterday's demo in the keynote, we get some really great visibility as far as the success of our evaluations. The problem is when you're working in organizations and with larger teams, how do you explain what that data actually means? Let's see if I can zoom out a little bit. So you can see where we have some inconclusive, some improvement. If we zoom out even further, this one we see that we have some work to do where some certain things are degraded. This is really great, except there's no explanation as far as what this actually means if you don't know LLM or RAG. So as part of this particular workflow, we also added in an agent evaluation overview. And this part is also powered by models, where you can add it in as a single step before anything else to maybe add additional context as part of those job summaries. And again, you set that on one place, you use a reusable workflow, and you can call that in others. The code that Ben showed you earlier, where it was super verbose, I'm doing JSON piping and curl commands and everything, this is still so brand new that that was the first way that we could go and invoke it because it's open, you can call it, you can take advantage of it. But we now do have an official action that I'm just going to highlight the lines for here. And this is an easier way to do it, where now you can take advantage of inference as part of an official AI action. You can give it a system prompt and a prompt of what you want it to do. So in this particular case, I wanted it to give me, from the perspective of an AI assistant that's knowledgeable about evaluations, to give me a summarize of this criteria. Keep it simple, keep it 150 words or less, use bullet points, but make it to where I'm adding additional context to these job summaries, because that adds additional value for your peer reviews, for your code reviews, for just making sure that you also have some of that traceability. Now, the last thing I wanted to point out here for our coverage issue is that we also want to talk about security. And to do that, let me get a security repo up with one that is intentionally broken. And I'm just going to show you almost 4,000 security errors. And yes, again, like I said, that is intentional. But here's another thing that we can do when we're starting to take advantage, and this is just things that I've thought of when we're starting to take advantage of models, is it would be great to get weekly or nightly summary reports of the security issues in my organization, in my repos, getting reports of maybe I'm doing something with security campaigns, which I'll show you momentarily, but getting some sort of detail in human readable language with actionable tasks. Here's what I've noticed, here's what you can do, here's how it can be fixed. So if we take a look at the security alerts, I could go through and start reading all of this, or I could build an actions workflow. But what might also be helpful is being able to take advantage of certain insights. So I can see insights for my particular projects or code when it comes to security. I can also take advantage of any kind of dependency graphs. And this part is really cool because this is a new feature that the team just released. And this is, again, thinking of how you can tie this into models, but looking at, in this one repo, I have 110 critical errors or critical dependencies, or I have 110 dependencies, and the top ones that I can see right now are anywhere from critical to high. That sounds terrible, but do I have control over all this? We added a new feature where we can also filter now by relationship, and let's search where we can filter either by direct, by transitive, or inconclusive. If I search by direct and I hit enter, that 100 and something filters down to 11. So now I can filter down the noise. Now, this is great, but as a human, I have to go in there and do that filtering. Being able to leverage models as part of your workflow to get those nightly reports or weekly reports, you can now invoke that same kind of data and say, hey, you have 11 things you need to filter. And then you can go in from an organization or enterprise perspective. You can go over to the security tab. You can see your alerts overall for an entire organization, and you can start to create things called campaigns. So based on that data, now you want to create a campaign that I want to address all critical alerts by this date. And then you can start creating, it's almost like a task or a job of you're going to assign your engineers to go start checking this off. It has to be done. And you get now some insights and some visibility into how successful you are. How many alerts were dismissed, how many were successful, how many are still pending, and how many are still open, and how many are in progress. We also, like I said, have the Dependabot alerts and Dependabot dashboard, so you can see how those alerts are being prioritized. And you can also tie that into things like secrets. How many secrets do you have open in your code that you've already rolled back, but you still have to push changes for? Or even better, when Ben talked about push protection and rule sets, how you can also put push protection in place for secrets, which prevents users from being able to push the secrets into your repos to begin with. And you can even, we now support, let's say that you're testing, you're doing pen testing, or you're testing security, you're testing those rules or those evaluations that Ben talked about. You can also add in bypass rules where now users are allowed to send a bypass request where it's, hey, I know I have a secret in here, but this is intentional, or this is a false positive, or that's not a secret, it just looks like one. And rather than having to go page someone or ping someone on Teams or wherever, you can actually just submit a request to your organization or to your administrator that says, give me permission to be able to do A, B, and C, or do the push. And luckily, actually, it seems like in our Okta demo, no one has made a push protection bypass request in the past month. Let's go ahead and see if anyone's done that for secrets real quick, because you can also then dismiss any kind of alerts. Looks like we don't have any, so that's a good sign. No one's trying to get past the rules. The insights and metrics is really powerful from like an organization perspective to be able to see how many alerts you have open, what your remediation plan is, what your prevention plan is. But I invite all of you and challenge all of you that now with the addition of having things like models, this data is great, but it's not helpful if it's not actionable. So if you can now leverage this data, query it as part of workflows, send it to a Slack channel or Slack team, now you can start saying, I'm going to take advantage of security campaigns. I'm going to start taking advantage of this actionable information.
The last aspect I want to think about when it comes to securing our CI/CD pipeline is how I'm going to do my connection potentially to my registry, my Artifactory, my Nexus, or anything I've got on-prem securely, or how I can provide access to that.
You are three.
So one thing we've added in Actions is the ability for our hosted compute, as well runners that run your action jobs, to have access inside your network. We've done that with something called VNet integration. This allows us to start our compute, but to start the network interface of that runner inside one of your VNets. So to set that up, we'd need to create a new network configuration. And we need to add our Azure Virtual Networks. We'll add our set again. And yep, so in this instance, we're in US East. And this means that all of our jobs that then will run in US East. So it also gives us that determinism around where this will run. So with that network configuration created, we now need to go and actually apply that to a set of our runners. So in Actions, we do that with the concept called runner groups. Runner groups are a way to permit different repos or even different workflows to only access a subset of machine sizes or a subset of networks. So create a new runner group. Actually, rather than creating one, I have one. Filter that down. Go into our VNet runner group. And then in here, we'll apply our network configuration. That means that, so that's applied. So any jobs that now run on either Navigating down VNet or VNet Windows will now always run with the network controller of that inside my network, inside my VNet. That also means that I can apply firewall rules to it, NSG rules to it, and I've got complete visibility over the network traffic for all of those jobs. And only the repos that I allow in here can access these machines and get inside that network. So I wanted to restrict that down in this case. I've got one repository. I could even scope that down to only be, say, my build workflow or my release workflow. So if only my release workflow is going to have access, say, to my Artifactory instance to do this, I might scope that right down to just be that release workflow, and that's the only one that can then get access inside that network. So with that.
One more thing. Hold on. I just did want to. Oh, sorry. You were going to go.
No, you go.
OK. One more thing I did want to point out was in Actions, when we're talking about security, we're talking about making sure we're putting things in VNets, we're doing things with OIDC, we're also making sure that we're doing things from a security perspective. I just want to really quickly highlight also from a compliance perspective, when you are tying all of these little pieces together, you have your Actions runners running through a VNet, you have OIDC, you have security in place. You can also take advantage of things like CodeQL, where you're doing code scanning as part of your pull requests. And you're getting some Copilot autofix suggestions. But most importantly, when it does find a particular vulnerability that maybe doesn't meet the threshold that you've said to go ahead and allow, you can also, as part of everything we've talked about today, the rule sets, being able to scope things down, have it be least privileged, you can also make sure that you put as part of your settings, as part of your rule sets, that you want to make sure that you require certain actions workflows to pass. So maybe your workflow is the VNet workflow or the VNet runner, and the workflow is tied to the runner, but I want to make sure that that workflow passes. If it doesn't, it's going to fail, and then it can't be pushed through, it can't be merged until whatever check is passed. To make some of those settings, or to set some of those settings, is you can do that right underneath the rule sets, and I just want to call that out real quick. Let's go into rules and rule sets, and we'll take a look at main. This is a real repo that obviously you saw has these requirements, but not only does it have what Ben showed as far as requiring approval before merging, but we're also requiring status checks to pass. And when we scroll down, we can make sure that we're applying our security policy, our build, our Linton test, and so we can make sure that we're very specific with these are the workflows or the runners that we need to make sure pass before this is allowed into production. And then you can also make sure you do important things like blocking force pushes. So you want to make sure as part of CI/CD and part of pipeline security that you're really scoping this down and trying to keep your environment as tight as possible. And then let's go back to your slides.
Yep. So the only other thing I want to call out is that we've talked a lot today about doing all of this with Azure. It's worth remembering that Actions is multi-platform, and we do have the marketplace, which is a way to get access to a ton of precompiled or modular pieces of components that you can reuse across all of your workflows. And there are actions for further security things. There are actions that allow you to publish to updates to Slack, actions that allow you to deploy to different places. We have over 24,000 actions in the marketplace. So there's a ton of different ways in there to interface with various different systems and to accelerate your automation across all of your enterprise.
And the best thing is if one of the 24,000 actions does not meet your needs, you can write your own actions. They're just written in JavaScript, TypeScript. We have customers that sometimes have specific use cases, and so they want to create their own actions, or they also want to have their own apps, and they can be able to add their own apps to their organization and enterprise and be able to make sure that every team or every project, every repo has access to that as well through an application and not just an action.
So with that, we've looked at how we can reuse those workflows. We've simplified those deployments for those dev teams. We've done that in a secure fashion. And we know that we've got other services we can use across our marketplace to deploy. So again, QR code there on end-to-end traceability. That's on attestations. But with that, we've looked at how we can improve the visibility across all of our repositories. We've looked at how we can apply that standard governance. I should do this in proper. I'm too used to doing custom calls where I don't do that. We've looked at how we can improve the visibility and planning across all of our enterprise and provide insight both from the work items, but also from the security items. We've looked at how we can apply that standard governance from repo rule sets and using those custom repo properties to scope those down. We've looked at how we can apply security across our enterprise, both the security tools we have and looking at how we can do things like hardening our deployments with attestations. And then we've seen how all of that comes together in that GitHub Actions experience. One thing we've released quite recently is the GitHub Well Architected Guide, and this is an opinionated guide on how to architect all of your GitHub setup. I think this came out maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So it's very cool. It's a whole sort of rich website around the best way to approach that.
And then the last thing that we just want to highlight for everything that we've kind of covered today is everything we've touched on, from rule sets, from governance, from security, everything is designed to help you increase efficiency by taking advantage of things like planning and boards and rule sets and making sure that you have the confidence that your organization and your enterprise is set up securely. You now can work a little bit faster knowing that you have some guardrails in place. We talked a lot about security, not just from a GitHub Advanced Security perspective, but from making sure that when you are doing your deployments, you're using things like OpenID Connect or OIDC. You're making sure that you have things like Dependabot Alert filtered in, or if you are using, whether it's CodeQL or any other kind of security scanners that are available in the marketplace, that security is not something that's bolted on afterwards. It's thought of from day zero, from a shift left perspective. And by doing all of these things, it also helps you with maximizing your collaboration, because now you can more easily work with different teams, with different projects. Again, the ability to have the golden repos or golden templates, that these are the ones that we know our security team has signed off on. It already has the workflow set up. It already has settings set up. It already has a folder structure set up. All of this is super helpful when it comes down to collaboration as well. And then now, this is the time where we have about 9 minutes left. And if you have feedback, if you have questions, if you have things that you wanted us to cover, or you have questions about even the roadmap, this is the time to talk directly to the product team and get your questions answered, give your feedback, and really feel heard. If you want to come up to the mic. Go ahead, and anyone who does want to, come up to the mic. We can kind of start like a single file line, and we look forward to talking.
Sure. Can you put that QR code slide one more time, the last but 2?
Well architected.
The one before.
One more?
One more.
One more.
The intertraceability.
Thank you. My question was on campaigns.
OK.
So we turned it on, we tried to create a campaign, we actually created 2, but what essentially happened was we created a campaign, we had about 30 issues that spanned 10 repositories, 5 teams. We created it, nobody actually knew about it because it was just a laundry list sitting in the bottom left side corner of your GitHub screen. The teams didn't know that there was a campaign going on. Then we had to practically send an email everybody saying, hey, we have a campaign, let's go finish this. Is that how it was intended to work? What was the working model? What was the thought process behind it?
That's a good question. I don't work directly on the security team, so I cannot tell you the thought process behind the engineering. What I can say is that it's great feedback, and I will surface that with the team. What I can also say is that's one of the things that I'm most excited about when it comes to models. In particular, so my background, if anyone did see the keynote, I introduced myself saying I'm Jessica, I'm a developer, which is true now. But my background is I was a sysadmin for over a decade. I spent a lot of time as operations, or the artist formerly known as IT Pro. So one of my favorite things is kind of thinking about how we can kind of apply some of these new features that would traditionally be targeted towards developers, how we can apply it to our process. And the biggest advantage I can think of is there's always so much noise in organizations, in repos, regardless of how visible we make things like security campaigns on the screen. It's still hard when there's so many things we can do at once. And so taking advantage of something like models to be able to invoke and query that data, query security campaigns, query Dependabot alerts, query secret scanning, anything that is actionable, and being able to organize an actual report, maybe nightly, weekly, whatever that looks like for your organization and whatever makes sense, and sending it to the appropriate teams, in my opinion, is a lot more actionable than requiring those teams to go and click around and look on the screen. With that said, everyone is different, and being able to have a good UI is absolutely important, so I will take that back to the team. But my first thought would be is also think about how you can start to take advantage of some of these things to adjust the product to work for your use case. So if you're using 2 different security campaigns, figure out how you can say I have 6 items that I have to figure as part of one security campaign and 10 for another. Use models to say, what are the top 3? What do I need to work on this week? And kind of having something else not even just direct or task your team, but giving that kind of like constructive, actionable data, personally, I think is really important. But again, I will take that feedback back to the team. I wish I could give you an answer about why or if it was intended. But I can say one of the things I love also about GitHub is regardless of whatever intentions existed, the product teams love feedback, and we're constantly looking on improving this for you. Like GitHub is for you as developers, right? So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Probably a relatively minor question, but in Azure DevOps, you had the ability to create canonical release artifacts and stick them in the artifact feed as like a universal package, or it could be just an arbitrary collection of scripts or files or whatever. I haven't found like an exact equivalent of that in GitHub. Is there one or one planned?
Can we talk about package repos or package storage?
Yeah, so we have both releases and packages today in GitHub. So with both of them, a lot of our work at the moment is focused on how we can sort of lean into the provenance and the attestation side of things rather than looking at any of that direct parity, as a lot of the customers we talk to are leaning into SLSA, the Secure Lifecycle Software Artifacts side of things. So that's how you create immutability, that's how you have your attestations. So we've been putting a lot of our energy in there and looking ahead at that rather than directly some of those like canonical release sides from the CD piece that exists in pipelines, and particularly in the release side of pipelines, which is just a lot richer than what we have in Actions today. We are looking ahead at what our strategy is for CD, but at the moment, the main thrust of energy is around the CI and the build experience, and particularly around the attestation and the security side of it. So nothing immediate, but
A lot of customers that I talk to use third-party integrations to be able to take advantage of packages. Primarily, Artifactory is a big one, X-Ray, being able to kind of leverage that. Not that I'm trying to sell it or suggest it, just mainly we do have a lot of customers that will bring their own kind of package management, mainly because they also are trying to use it with other parts of their organization or other parts of their team. But Ben is right, like we do have as part of like the Actions runs, you can be able to publish packages, but it is not a one-to-one parity from what an Azure DevOps experience is today.
Thank you.
Yeah, please. We have 2 more minutes, so we'll take one more question.
I'll make it quick. This is about, we recently migrated from ADO to GitHub, especially on the rule sets. I can set some rule sets on the repo level. We wanted to set up rule sets on more like a certain path level rule sets within a repo.
Like from an organization or team level?
No, within a certain repo, I want to apply certain rules only if there's a changes in certain paths within that repo.
yeah. So kind of with push protection rules, that's sort of what you get today. So the push protection rules allow you to protect certain paths within the repo. So push protection means that, why not?
But you're saying also PATs, right? You want to be able to have it like with a personal access token lockdown?
No, within a repo, if a certain files are changed, I want to require certain rule sets only if certain files are changed.
So you want a rule set to only be locked onto a certain file, effectively. So the closest we have right now in rule sets is the push protection rule sets. So in here, I can restrict changes to particular file paths. So it's not applying things like I want two reviewers. We're not there yet saying like, I want 2 people to review PRs for this file path. We're not quite there. What we have so far is that we can just restrict which paths can be changed. And that's sort of a stepping stone towards that. So I could say I don't want anyone to, it excites me working on Actions. So I don't want anyone to change github/workflows/say release, except for, and I could then have like maybe the repo admin can change that.
As part of bypass requests then too, or have bypass requests been extended to push protection rules?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so then as part of the bypass requests, you can then, if somebody does get an error, like I'm trying to push to this, and maybe you do want that person to be able to be allowed to, but they want to have it be reviewed, that's where then as part of the bypass request, you can allow people to say, hey, let me through please, like I really want to, and then whoever is part of the bypass, if you scroll up, whoever's part of that bypass list should get an email saying, hey, someone's trying to make a change to this file, you can go and review that request. So the experience is not probably perfect for what you're looking for, but we are constantly in the past 6 months alone since Universe been making a heavy investment towards really improving the enterprise experience from a GitHub entire end-to-end platform.
And a huge part of that investment is rule sets. The big recent thing we did with rule sets was we added them at the enterprise level. So rule sets have very recently come to the enterprise level along with the custom repo properties. With that done, the energy is now going back to what are the missing triggers, what are the missing things that you've asked for, what are the missing things that people want to do, particularly for like the monorepo use case, which you highlight is probably like a core thing that would be interesting for you to like have those subgroup folders with different rules applied. So yeah, we're continuing to invest there.
We have a monolith repo.
Yeah.
That's very
Yep.
Yeah.
I guessed.
All right, and that is time. Thank you everyone so much
you.
for hanging out with us. Thank you for your
Really appreciate
questions. We really appreciated it.
Perfect.